We're Hassani and Danielle Pettiford, and we're a real couple with real problems who almost called it quits.
I was very frustrated. I became very disconnected, very jaded and cold.
We have 4 children, going on 20 years of marriage, and we practice what we preach.
Our mission, to change the way couples relate to one another and teach them the skills needed to improve the quality of their relationships. This is the Couples Academy Show.
Well, welcome everyone. You're watching Couples Academy Ask the Experts. That's right, we're coming on every single evening, Monday through Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So wherever you are around the world, we want you to tune in. Now, we've done this because so many of you are in different hemispheres, different time zones. Many of you don't get a chance to see it live, but you want to be a part of that live experience. So we decided rather than doing a relationship Q&A on Friday, we would make every evening relationship Q&A so we can meet you directly where you're at. And so if you're tuning in for the first time and you don't know who you are, let's just go round robin and introduce ourselves. My name is Hassani Pettiford. I am a marriage coach and an infidelity recovery specialist. This is my beautiful wife, Danielle. Danielle, introduce yourself.
I am Danielle Pettiford. I am also a marriage coach and an Enneagram specialist.
And then we have my brother from another mother. We go back many, many, many years. He's been making impact all around the world to men in particular. Introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Jeff Witt, and I am a male empowerment coach.
And then we have a powerhouse woman who resides in Tampa, Florida. She's been working with couples, really helping to bring change and transformation in people's lives. Introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Lakeisha Hines, and I'm also a marriage coach, and I work with individuals as well.
And so the way we do this, you post your question, we give you your answer. But before we get started, we want to make sure.
Like, share, and subscribe. Guys, hit that notification bell. You will not miss a show if you do that. And I know a lot of you are super excited about this evening show. Many of you said that you will be tuning in live from this point forward. So make sure that you share with all your friends and family and your neighbors and your sisters and your brothers so that we can spread this message across the world in the night.
Really quickly before we get started, we have December the 10th through the 12th, our last chance weekend. It is available. People are calling, people are emailing. We want you to see this quick video. Maybe you're hearing about this for the first time. You're on the verge of divorce. You've been impacted by an affair. You're a couple in crisis. You're looking for a way out. This is your opportunity to turn your life and your marriage around. Myself, Danielle, Jeff, and Lakeisha will be at the retreat in Atlanta. We want you to be there with us. Right after this video, we'll get started and dive into the first question.
Hey guys, you guys are watching Couples Academy After Dark. We're asking the experts today. Make sure that you register for the Last Chance Weekend, guys. You still have room. It's December 10th through the 12th. Don't miss it. If you are a couple in crisis, reach out to us and we'll give you more information. But I want to go to the first question of the evening, and make sure, guys, that you start putting those questions in, because what happens every time is that the questions come in just when we're closing out. So we want to make sure that we get to as many as we can. Start pushing your questions now. The first question that we have: how do you help the children in the home heal who have been affected by a parent's infidelity? Not only am I hurting, but the kids are hurting as well.
That's a deep question.
Yeah.
And really, it's one of the things that a lot of couples struggle with, but really people don't come with that question because they're focusing on the primary relationship between the husband and the wife, but the children are significantly impacted. In fact, there are 6 general responses that children have when they're in a household of a couple who's going through this type of marital crisis. So I'm going to give that, and then I want to open it up so that everyone could weigh in and really give Sean an answer to this question. Number one, the first response, there's a loss of trust. So in essence, the child loses trust in the parent who was unfaithful to their spouse. To their spouse, their other parent, right? But then also it can cause a loss of trust that one has in one's future romantic relationships, because there's a fear of intimacy. Like, will this happen to me? Can I? Now, think about this. If I'm a son and my father is unfaithful to my mother, right? That's one impact. I may think that all men are a certain type of way. But if my mother is unfaithful to my father, I have trust issues with women, because now I assume women are like that. You see? So it does leave an impact on the child. The second thing is shame. So sometimes there's shame that a person feels to be a part of a family where such a thing happened. Yeah. And so that's a legacy that they now have to carry. Then there's confusion about the meaning of love and the meaning of marriage. And if my parents stay, does that mean that I'm supposed to stay in the same situation? There's a legacy that's left behind, and oftentimes is attached to some type of confusion. Yeah. And then number 4, there's ambivalence that one has. Think about it. Ambivalence toward the unfaithful parent. You feel anger and resentment, but yet and still, that's my mother, that's my father. I have to give a certain level of respect and have a certain type of love for this person. And I don't know what I'm feeling and what I'm going through, or how do I respond? Yeah. And then number 5, I just want to get to, then there's resentment toward the betrayed parent. Now think about this. My father was cheated on, my mother was cheated on, and I have resentment towards that parent. Why? Because they're so consumed with what they're going through, they've given up all their responsibilities for that season of being a parent. So now I feel abandoned and neglected, and I now have to take on the role and responsibility that parent used to take on because they're not available.
That's real.
Or maybe I now have to be a caretaker to the parent.
Yeah.
So this, go ahead.
Everything that you're saying is true. I mean, I come from a broken family, and so I have my perspective. I have 3 brothers, and I am sure based on what you're saying there, they all had a different experience. For me, not really knowing why, my mom didn't do the whole bashing of my father and, he ain't no good, though I did see them fight. We kind of didn't know why. I remember that when they finally divorced, I literally imagined until I was like 11 that I was in a coma and that this was all fake. Like I literally just imagined that this wasn't even happening so that I could cope. And I remember the day that I said to myself, like at night I would lay down and imagine that this was all fake and like my parents were actually loving parents together standing over my bedroom waiting for me to wake up out of a coma. And I remember saying to myself, this is real. This has actually happened. Stop faking it. Stop pretending. And I think what happened is that as a child, I had to close my own loops because there was no explanation that came my way. Like my mother and my father never sat down and said, hey, this is what happened. It wasn't until years later that I understood what happened. And I actually understood why my mom chose not to give me those details because maybe it would have been too much. But I think helping a child understand what's going on, we don't understand how resilient children are. We're going to figure out a way to cope and to move forward. I think parents need to come together and come up with what it is that you're going to tell your children so that they don't have to make it up for themselves. But some of the other things that you were saying. I mean, I talked to my twin brother and he was just like, wow, hearing your experience, Danielle, from your ears, it's like it validates my experience. And I've talked to my brothers saying they felt like they had to be the men. They had to grow up before their time and be the husbands that my mother no longer had. So I think it's really the dynamics of the relationship under the roof, what happened, and the story. Sometimes we actually need to sit down and determine how much we can tell our children, and we need to tell them something to help them so that they don't have to navigate it on their own and figure it out on their own.
Powerful, powerful points. Lakeisha, I want you to weigh in on this question, and then Jeff, I want to jump over to you.
Yeah, so my background actually, prior to working with couples, I worked with children. And I loved working with children. I think that what ended up happening was I was getting stressed out with working with the kids because I would get them healthy, I get them feeling good, and then they go home to dysfunction. And it would completely unravel everything that we had worked on for weeks. So for me, I'm like, I really need to focus on the adults, because if the adults get it together, the children will be fine. If the adults have the strategies and tips and tools that they need, then they'll take care of the children and the children will be okay. So in terms of this particular question, it really depends on the age of the child. They're at different developmental stages. So depending on the age of the child will determine what it is that you need to do. But I 100% agree with Danielle. You do have to tell them something. You do have to be honest with them. You can't ignore them. You can't push them to the side, because what happens is they are going to create their own narratives, and you want to be in control of the narrative. Another thing that I found with some of the clients that I work with that have blended families, that have older children and younger children, the ones who left the home that are adolescents, they feel like the adolescents are cool because they're out of the house and they're gone. But no, they have more awareness and understanding. So they really are going to have some serious issues if you don't break it down and explain to them what's going on. And I think, Asana, you mentioned anger. There's a lot of anger typically with adolescents and higher, because they do understand what's going on. And if you're not explaining to them, they still hear, they still know. If they see whoever the betrayed is, they see that person crying and upset and miserable, they're going to put two and two together and they'll figure out who did what. And now they're angry at that other parent who betrayed that parent. And so if you don't have a conversation with them, not only will it impact your parental-child relationship, but it will impact their relationship with others in the future. Young kids, 3 years old, they are old enough to understand and feel, maybe not understand, but feel something. It's not always an understanding, but they feel something. So how do they respond? They cry. You have a kid who's been normal, typically developing, happy, feeling good, and all of a sudden they're sad and weepy and crying all the time. Well, they feel what's going on. So you do still have to have a conversation. And so even in between 3 and 21, there has to be a conversation. And you've got to explain to them what's going on. Please. And I can tell you, there's a lot of do's, and again, that's going to depend on the developmental level of the child. But I want to talk about some don'ts. Do not, under any circumstances, have negative conversation about that spouse that parent who betrayed the other parent. You can never talk bad about that other parent, because again, that influences that relationship between that child and their parent. Hassani, Danielle, you guys have talked so much about the different relationships. As husband and wife, we have a relationship, but we have a parental-child relationship as well, which is completely separate. So we can never intermingle and mix the two. So you never want to say anything negative about that parent who actually betrayed the other person, and always reassuring the child that it's not their fault. Because again, when you're not talking to them, they automatically assume it's their fault. They assume that they did something wrong. And maybe if I would have just gotten straight A's in school, mommy and daddy would still be together. And they make up these things. So you definitely have to reassure them that it's not their fault. So I want to give Jeff an opportunity to say something into
Excellent
this.
points. Excellent points. Jeff, weigh in.
Quickly, I think it's really going to depend on the emotional maturity of the parents, first of all, because if they're able to at least deal with each other civilly in a civil manner, then you can create an environment where you can allow the children to just simply ask questions. You know, instead of just feeding them a story, allow them to ask their own questions. They know something's wrong. Let them ask their own questions and be honest with them. That doesn't mean you have to give every morbid detail, but you can let them ask their questions. And I think getting answers for yourself is something that's important for both the couples and the children too. Second, I think it's important to let children know that forgiveness is not the same as condoning.
Mm.
So that it's possible to forgive. Forgiveness is an act of realization that humans are frail and make mistakes and sometimes transgress, whether it's on purpose or not. And I think that letting a child know that you're not agreeing with dad because you forgive him for what he did. That's not going to necessarily change your relationship with your father, or your mother, or whoever is the transgressor in the situation. And the third thing is, you know, and this is a lesson for both the parents and the children, is there's an old Native American story about there's two wolves that exist within you. One who is angry and mean and resentful, and one who is compassionate and loving and caring. Anyone who's ever studied wolves, like I have, you find that that's actually true about how they deal with each other. They have these two sides that are very strong. And they said, which one are you going to allow to survive within you? Well, it's the one you feed. So you feed the one that's compassionate and loving and caring, and that will come out slowly. And that's a lesson for both the parents and the children.
Excellent points, guys. And listen, get your children into some counseling, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Just like you have gone through a recovery process and restoration, the child may need to do the same as well. So family counseling, individual counseling is always good for every member of the family impacted by this affair. So hopefully, Sean, that answers the question and gives you a lot to chew on. I know we have a lot of other questions. We only got 15 minutes left, so go ahead, Jay.
All right, let's jump into JG's question. Is holding back, avoiding sex always a sign of a troubled marriage, especially after previous infidelities coming from the hurt partner? Somebody jump on that one.
Well, I think if you're holding back sex with the intention of trying to punish someone, I think that's a dangerous slope. You need counseling. Plain and simple. Yes, you need to be able to get over whatever barrier you're dealing with. But if you're planning on staying together, you're going to have to do something in the realm of working back to creating that level of intimacy at some point. Because just withholding it as a weapon or even as a wall of defense, somewhere, like there's two people that exist inside of us. One that builds walls, right? And one who builds their strengths. And when you build your strengths, you're able to go out in the world and act with confidence and know that you weren't the one, even though this happened to you, this is not the way you want to live your life. And you can take charge and move forward and know in confidence that you're going to do the right thing. Building those walls, I've never seen it work.
Yeah, you know, and we did a master class called Sex After Betrayal, and we talk about the typical ways that people react when an affair occurs sexually. Either you can go into sexual overdrive, where now you're trying to compensate and, you know, you're doing it out of fear of loss. So I'm going to, you know, sex my spouse so that they never think about leaving again, or they're never tempted, and then you go into a sexual drought, right? When you're having no sex, it's almost like an asexual relationship. And whether the motive is I'm trying to punish them or I'm just so triggered, just the thought of that penis or vagina ever touching me again, like that's the furthest thing from my mind. I'm not. And so there's a lot of healing that he or she needs to go through to open themselves up.
Right. And I would just add to that. I mean, neither is good. If you're going into sexual overdrive to show your spouse, you know, I can get with the best of them, like I'm the best, you know, which I've heard many say, or if you're just going in complete depletion. I mean, neither of those are good, but you have to think about it like this. You know, you just went through a crisis. You know, the affair, the betrayal discovery was a crisis. When you have a baby, you birth a baby, your body goes through crisis, right? Even after that, you need a time to heal. So I think there's nothing wrong with taking some time away from sex while you're working on building trust, while you're working on re-entering the bedroom is okay. But just to withhold with no plan, no set date to return to the bedroom, 1 month will turn into 10 years.
Oh, without a doubt.
Easily and quickly. And so you definitely need a plan to get back into the bedroom. bedroom, but you do need that time to heal. You do need that time to process and to get yourself to a place of trust.
I got a question from Francisco through text. Basically, he was unfaithful to his wife, and now he has a fear that she will do it to him. And in essence, she will retaliate. That's a fear. There's no evidence of it. Now he's become insecure. He's looking through her phone, checking her emails, just making sure she won't do to him what he did to her. How does he overcome this fear and anxiety that he's suffering from?
Yeah, I wanted to chime in on that last one. And I
really quickly, because I want to get to, we only got like 10 minutes.
Motive is everything. If your motive is to get back at, then we're not in a good place. But if your motive is holding out because you know physically, spiritually, emotionally, mentally, you're not in a good place, then you know that you're on the right path. Our mind plays tricks on us, right? When we have done something that we were not supposed to do, our mind automatically tells us that the other person is doing the same thing. Yeah. So you definitely have to make sure that you're not listening to that wrong voice that's in your head, and you are making sure that you go through your own healing and recovery process, making sure that you strengthen that relationship, and then you won't have to worry about that.
Literally, that's it. Like working on yourself, because if you are still worried about what she's doing, you were probably worrying about it before when it was you doing it. There are many people who will say they were cheating, and every time they turned around, they thought that it was their spouse doing it because it was them. Or they will say, my spouse is blaming me for doing what they were doing. That means that you need to draw the circle around your own 2 feet and work on yourself and become a trustworthy person so that you can now trust.
Powerful, powerful point. DWW, good evening, everyone. My husband had an affair with someone from work and believes that because I now have an issue with him hanging out with coworkers outside of work, that I'm being controlling. What are your thoughts on that, guys?
You got to earn that back, brother. You got to earn it back. You don't win it back. There's no time periods per se. Your actions have to be so loving that you overwhelm them with the want and desire to trust you. And that means you're going to have to change who you are so that they can see that change manifested in all of your actions, words, and deeds.
Listen, whoever cheats, when you cheat, you have given up your right to freedom and privacy. And you've given all of that up because you have to be a complete open book, and you have to give that spouse whatever they need to feel safe and to feel secure and to be able to trust you once again. So they feel that way because this happened with a coworker.
Absolutely.
And work is a trigger, and everybody associated with work is a trigger. And it's your job to help them heal so that they can feel safe with you going back into that environment again.
Or leave the job. That happens all the time too.
I had my emotional affair. I had to leave the job. There was no way. It was the only way I was going to save my marriage.
Absolutely. Done all the time. Bible Children's Stories B says, how do you open up to your spouse with your own opinion when you notice that the partner usually disagrees and you feel that your own opinion falls on deaf ears 99% of the time?
That sounds like a communication issue. It definitely sounds like a communication issue. Maybe there's a situation where the spouse, they've had some difficulty communicating in the past. I'm not sure. Like, I feel like I need more information with that one, but it sounds like you feel like you're not being heard. And so I would then question delivery, intent. What has your past communication been like? Have you guys had conflict communicating? I'm not sure. I have more questions.
Yeah, and I would say, not always is every relationship issue going to be like level 10 crisis. Sometimes you need to get into counseling just for mediation. Sometimes your spouse can no longer hear from you, and you can no longer hear from them. You're talking two different languages, and you want to get in front of somebody who can help you hear what you're not hearing. Because after a while, it's just like advertising, right, Jeff? You're in advertisement. After a while, if you keep seeing the same ad, literally you stop seeing it. You stop seeing it. You got to change the ad up and see something else. Sometimes you need somebody to decipher and translate for you what you've been saying all the time. And that person will say it in a different way and hit that person and be like, I never heard that until I heard that. It's exactly what happened with us with all of the criticalness. Remember, I would be complaining all the time, and then you heard something on the radio and bing, So sometimes you just need somebody to help you communicate with your spouse.
There's a quick DIY here, and this is tough to do without going through some kind of counseling, but a quick DIY, if you can get both partners to agree, that's the hard part.
Yeah.
It's just simply listening, taking turns doing this. Whenever someone's trying to say something, stopping and just, so let me just repeat what I heard you just say. You go through this little process. It's a whole technique. There's books on it, and I can't think of the book right now, but it helps because that way you are re-articulating what they heard, they're agreeing, and then would you like me to comment or did you just want me to listen? And it's this whole little process of going back and forth where you get through issues. It's really tedious, and sometimes it feels like it's overdone, but when you're at a point where your communication is failing, sometimes you have to dumb your conversations all the way down so you can rebuild back to flow.
Yeah, that takes a lot of maturity, communication maturity, right? Because even sometimes we struggle with that. We do that same thing sometimes and we feel that heat meter going up. We got to step away. But yes, when you get to the point where you have learned those communication styles and you know how the rules of arguing, you can follow those principles.
You have another question?
Let's see. Yeah, we got here from Legendary Lady. How do you deal with the offender's inconsistency? He'll be transparent until I have a trigger, and then he changes the passwords and says his trying is pointless if I'm gonna have triggers.
So I think that's an insensitivity of the spouse who every time his spouse is triggered, see, that's the thing. Like, you can't control the recovery process of your spouse. It can't be on your timetable. And oftentimes we become very patient. We should be beyond this by now. We've had too many conversations. I'm not dealing with this anymore. You need to get it together. And now I'm going to punish you by switching everything that I promised to do, shutting down all forms of communication, whether it be emails, social media, phone. I'm going to change passwords. That is very insensitive. And what that does is that makes the recovery process a whole lot longer, a whole lot harder, because they can't trust who you are. It's beyond what you did. They can't trust how you're showing up today.
Right.
So, Sonny, also not only can they not control the recovery process, the spouse can't control the triggers. They can't control like when they come. Let me say that. Right. You will learn how to deal with them, but they can't control when the triggers come and how they show up and how often they show up. They have no control over that.
I think both parties actually have some responsibility in this. One, is it really a trigger? You know, because a lot of times these things that trigger us are things we've actually anchored in and said, this is going to bother me for the rest of my life. And on the other hand, men have this bad tendency to kind of force and push through and just deal with. And so they want the wife to come along with them in that journey. And I'm telling you, we make really bad decisions when we do that. When our wives get triggered after something, whether it's a physical affair, emotional affair, or even just flirting that turned into something where she gets triggered, the best thing you can do is become more transparent, more welcoming. Put a smile on your face when you do it. Get rid of the frustration, the anger, and the frown, because all of those things, it's the same thing. Men do this, women do this. There's a tendency when you want somebody to really pay attention to what you say, we go up here in our tone. And that is the most shrilling, shrieking sound for every human being on this planet. When we're way high like this and we're yelling, and when we calm down and we go slow, that's the most trustworthy sound that comes from human beings. But we tend to do the exact opposites of what we really want and to articulate. And so if you think she's being triggered, give her your phone. Open your passwords. Let her set your password. Right. Here's my computer. Do whatever you want. Have fun.
To me, it's the camera's up. To me, that seems like the obvious thing to do, Jeff, but it's not. People don't do it. And maybe that's partly because there's still so much to hide.
It's that building wall versus building strength.
Yeah,
building
absolutely.
the wall is hiding behind the wall for your own defensive purposes, and building your strength is putting yourself out there, being vulnerable, because courage requires vulnerability.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, you can't go backwards. You definitely can't go backwards. You don't go back to hiding things. You don't go back to locking things. Like, that's going to set you back, and you're never going to move forward if you keep doing that.
Absolutely. Francisco says trickle truth is dangerous. Absolutely
Amen.
right. And that's another form of trickle truth. Hey, I just want to comment. JD Pruitt says, how many sessions is mediation? As many as you need. You know, you're coming to us to help you have a conversation. So reach out, JD. I've been waiting to hear from you for so long. I want to meet your wife. So just make it happen, brother.
Guys, we hope that you got something out of today's session. That's our 30 minutes. It's up, but we will be back for you tomorrow at 9 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Tune in, let people know, share, subscribe, get the word out, because there's so many people who are looking for answers to their questions because they just don't know what to do. And if you have any questions, reach out to us at couplesacademy.org, 678-200-8996. And until then, we will see you on tomorrow. Thank you, guys. I appreciate all of the great insight. See you tomorrow. Take care.